Hello, I'm Samantha Nolan-Smith, and this is Lessons in Visibility. In this show, we ask what can be learned from the two faces of visibility. The first involves stepping forward and choosing to be seen and heard. The second opens you up to new ways of seeing and hearing the world around you. Welcome to the show. Hello, it's lovely to be with you. This season, I'm sharing lessons gleaned from 4 years of teaching our signature program, which is a group coaching and leadership development program called Women Speaking Up. I'm starting this series with what I think is one of the most important aspects of the whole thing, which is how you run a membership-style program for 4 years, being visible, showing up consistently every single week when you have chronic illnesses. There are two things you need to know to set the scene. First is that Women Speaking Up has run as a membership-style program for the entirety of its lifespan. The only break in the entire year has been those 2 weeks over the Christmas-New Year period, and otherwise there have been weekly live events the whole year round to complement the digital programs that the students gain access to. So that's 4 years of weekly live events on top of weekly emails, curriculum development and refinement, administration and marketing of the program itself. The second thing that's relevant to this episode is that I have a couple of chronic illnesses. For a number of years, I had chronic fatigue, and off the back of chronic fatigue, I've ended up with a suppressed immune system. And that creates its own snowballing effect, if you like, where after having COVID, I ended up with long COVID for about 18 months. And after that, I was picking up other viruses regularly. If you're a parent or a caretaker of any small children, you might be familiar with that period of their lives when they first go to childcare, if that's where you have sent them, and suddenly all the viruses are coming home. Usually the children aren't too bad, but the rest of the family gets regularly taken out. And it feels for a time like all you're doing is getting better from one virus and then getting sick again and getting better from another virus and getting sick. And that's what it's like to be immune suppressed, but it's like it all the time. After my mum passed away last year, things got particularly bad for me because grief also suppresses the immune system. And so that double whammy of immune suppression and grief meant that I was sick in some form or another every single week for 6 months. So I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that I've had to learn to become an expert in sustainable visibility. And it's those lessons that I wanted to share with you today. I've got 10 lessons for you. Starting with number 1, following my energy levels and rhythms. The first thing that is really important and has been important for me for many years is making sure that I understand my energy levels and the rhythms in the week when I feel more introverted, when I feel more extroverted, and matching my work accordingly. One of the great benefits of working for yourself is that you can do this well. So on Mondays, for example, many people like to have lots of meetings and really jump into the week, but I feel like I need a quiet day most Mondays because I've had the whole weekend with my children. I have 2 young-ish children. One is still in primary school and one's just in high school. So I've had a lot of interaction with them all weekend. And so for me, Monday morning in particular, it's really important as an introvert to have some downtime, to have some quiet time. I'm still working, but I'm not talking. I'm not interacting with people. Knowing that about myself means that I've been able to align the right kinds of work to the days of the week. And as the week goes on, I become more extroverted. I feel like I've had more time to myself. And so then I schedule workshops for Women Speaking Up later in the week, when I can bring more of myself to that group experience. I also watch my energy through the day. There's no particular formula for this. I just observe and I notice, I'm feeling quite tired right now. And if I am feeling tired, then I'll do something that's more mundane, that's more administrative, maybe something where I can just tick along doing the work and listen to a podcast show or do something of that nature. And other times I'll notice, I'm really ready for some deep focus work now. And when that happens, I'll drop whatever else I may have been doing and I'll really focus in for a few hours or a whole morning or a whole afternoon or whatever it might be. That comes from watching my energy levels and responding in kind. The second thing that I have done is I have dealt with resistance immediately. Resistance looks like, I've got to do this thing and I don't want to do it. Of course, you've already got built in there different times of the day and when I'm feeling more energetic and when I'm not. And even still, there are some tasks where I can go day after day after day and I realize, I still haven't got around to that. And so what I do is when I notice that, I immediately do some inner work. I notice, what is my story here about this task? What is the resistance I feel? And then I do some work there to clear out whatever the resistance is. That then means that when I go to do the task, I'm not expending energy forcing myself to do something that I don't want to do. I'm in a much more neutral space and I'm just doing the work without story. This is critical for me personally because my energy levels aren't what other people's are. My body won't let me push on when there's resistance there. It requires me to stop, to clear out the resistance, and then move forward from there. What that means is that even if my working week is truncated because I've spent some time in bed, I'm very productive when I'm actually working, which evens itself out and means that overall I end up being able to produce a lot of output despite working fewer hours than many other people. The third thing that I did was that I aligned program delivery with my best set of skills, with the skills that come most naturally to me. So I enjoy creating content, and there's quite a lot of content inside Women Speaking Up so that different people can pick and choose content that meets them where they are on their visibility journey. Creating that didn't feel like a drain and felt like a pleasure most of the time. And this is always something that I'm looking for in my working life because tasks that feel invigorating keep my energy at a level that means that I can live a relatively normal life. I also thought about what would work for me and what would work for my students when it came to live events. And I was conscious that many students who come to Women Speaking Up also have some form of disability. So I didn't want to make the program really fast and intense and requiring them to really push through physical barriers in order to keep up. So I made the program long, I made the programmatic rhythm spacious, and that gives them time to integrate and implement what's being learned. We have video-based workshops every 2 weeks, and they're focused on learning or block clearing or strategic development. And then in between, we have Q&A sessions. And the Q&A sessions are text-based rather than being videos like the workshops are. This achieves a lot of different things. It works to accommodate different learning styles. It supports a lot of the more introverted students. And it means that I'm only on video every 2 weeks. And so there have been many times when I've convened those text-based Q&A sessions from my bed. That has enabled me to keep showing up and keep doing the work and keep supporting the students while simultaneously supporting myself. The fourth thing that I did was I pulled a small team of teachers around me. While I do the majority of the teaching, students also get the benefit of learning from a few other teachers through the course of a cycle. We've been working for quite some time in 90-day cycles, and the students have had the benefit of doing workshops directly on visibility-related topics with me, and then having some complementary teachings from other teachers. What I have learned in the 15 or so years that I've been consciously managing my health and my energy levels is that if I show signs of sickness, I have to go to bed immediately. It's a don't pass go, don't collect $200 kind of situation. I just need to drop everything and lay down. And when I do that, my recovery time is much, much quicker than it otherwise would be. So pushing through isn't really an option, which means having teachers who can pick up my slack if required is wonderful. I've very rarely had to use it because the program delivery pacing is so good, but it's useful to know it's there. And it definitely came in handy when I was planning my mother's funeral and I really wasn't in any sort of space to be convening a workshop. The fifth thing that I did was I created a business model which saw me developing deep relationships with fewer people rather than shallow relationships with lots of people. This is my natural way of being visible. I love facilitating workshops, and I love it even more when I know the group I'm facilitating. That was one of the reasons for building a membership-style business model. The lack of significant breaks through the year is the downside of a membership-style business model. The upside is that you get to know your students very well, and that makes workshops more like visiting a group of friends than it does teaching a bunch of strangers. So that is something that I knew wouldn't drain my energy, but would enhance my experience as the teacher, which in turn obviously makes for better workshops. You might find that that's a better model for you, or you might prefer to teach a great many people, but not develop those deeper relationships with them. There is no right or wrong here. There is no correct model. There's knowing yourself. There's knowing your natural way of being visible, and then developing your programs around that. The sixth thing I did was I tried to reduce any friction in the program because I didn't really have the energetic bandwidth to deal with friction on top of all of the other things that are required to manage and deliver a program of this nature. I'll talk more about that in another lesson, specifically how to reduce conflict or friction amongst students. But for now, the element that worked really well was honoring the people who showed up, being willing to make changes as the group changed, and then following the energy of the group rather than trying to impose my own energy on the group. This meant listening to the students, meeting them where they are, creating enough programmatic space to shift the focus depending on the needs of the group, staying in my lane, in my area of expertise, offering a dependable experience for the students whilst also making room for creative expression so that it could grow or be responsive. This idea of having a container that's dependable, that's reliable, and then creating opportunity for creative expression and responsiveness within that is the style that I think works best, both for teachers and for students. So when I found that people were coming in who were feeling very scattered or very busy, and they weren't feeling very grounded and so couldn't focus or be consistent with their strategies, I went back to a lot of foundational stuff, and I worked on coming into the body and developing habits around consistency and slowing down. I looked at nervous system support because of the ungroundedness and because visibility work can be so triggering. I was aware that the work can activate our nervous systems. And so sometimes I had to really focus in on stabilizing that element before we could continue. The seventh thing I did was I set clear boundaries. This sounds obvious, people say it all the time, and yet it's so, so important. Primarily, that has meant that people know I'm available during the live workshops and I'm available during office hours. We have a community space we call the campus, and that is open 24/7, but people know that if they want a fast response, come into the workshop or come into an office hours. There will be a response in the campus, but it'll be a couple of days probably to get that turnaround on those responses. We also shut down for a couple of weeks a year, and there is no facilitation of the community space, and there's no live events in that time. And then what I have found over the years is from time to time, people can get into the habit of connecting with me privately, DMing me or emailing me and telling me about their progress personally rather than telling the group. And that is part of the visibility journey. This is a place that feels safe. And the next step in that process is obviously to feel safe to share that with the group. So part of my job as the coach is to assist with moving them from one-on-one conversation to a group conversation. And so that's another boundary that I set with people. I encourage them to share with everybody, to let everybody know what's going on, and to understand that by sharing it with the group, there's enormous benefit not just to themselves, but to the group as a whole. If there is still a need for more one-on-one engagement, then I direct them to pick up some one-to-one sessions, which are always available to be purchased by the students. And I really like having those paths to be able to direct people to so that I can respond compassionately and show people the appropriate path. And I find that by doing that, people don't overstep. Of course, there's a visibility component to being able to do that, which is overcoming any stories of, oh, if I exert a boundary here, I'm a bad person, I'm not being sufficiently accommodating, etc., etc. And so all of that needs to be cleared out. And over the years, doing that work with the students has also benefited me enormously in terms of knowing how to set boundaries in a clear, compassionate way. Number 8 in this list is that I took advantage of programmatic rhythms. So I mentioned that we've been working in 90-day cycles, and what this has meant that I've been able to build those cycles into my own working life, where I can batch emails and podcast episodes because we have a private pod show for students and workshop planning, and I can do all of that at the beginning of each cycle. And that means that a great bulk of the work has been scheduled and automated early on in a 3-month period. That frees up a whole lot of time through the cycle. And that perfectly matches my physical state because it means when I'm healthy, I can get a lot of that work done. And when I'm not, I can rest knowing that the student experience is not being affected by my health. Number 9 is that I have found that opting for automation over delegation is a principle that works very well for me. So I've had different size teams over the years, and every single person I've worked with has obviously required some of my energy to manage. That's just human relationships. I've always looked for self-starters who require little oversight, and still I'm aware that managing people is its own job. So before I go out to contract somebody, employ somebody, I always consider, is there a way that this could be automated rather than needing to delegate it? I've also worked hard over the years to simplify my systems. One of the ways that I made life harder for myself than it needed to be in the early days was not simplifying my systems. I was just trying to get everything up and running. I wasn't really thinking about the long-term administrative tasks involved in managing something like this. And so I wasn't being as rigorous as I might have been about simplification. And I've had to then go back and deal with that legacy over time. So now my philosophy is simplify, simplify, simplify. And often the consequence of that is that I then don't need to bring somebody in to manage my complex system that won't work without human oversight. What it often means is I've been able to automate all of that because I've taken the time to really simplify the system, the process, whether that's the enrollment process or the offboarding process or any of the processes in between. And finally, number 10 is I've consciously brought in joy wherever I could. This is something that I learned from 4 years having intense chronic fatigue, where I was laying in bed for a lot of that time. And one of the lessons I learned amongst many others at that time was that joy brings energy into your life. Joy doesn't have to look like dancing around and being really active. It can look like watching a bird on a branch, or it can look like sitting on the lounge, hugging your child, or it can look like drinking a lovely cup of tea and reading a great book. For a long time now, I've looked for quiet joy in my life. I definitely have not had the energy reserves for that kind of outrageous dancing until dawn kind of joy that I sought out in my 20s and 30s. And I'm very happy with that. I'm happy that I had those experiences, and I'm happy that they're done. And this is a philosophy I've brought into my work. I ask, where is the joy in this? Is the joy in the writing? Is the joy in putting something into the world, with sharing it with people? Is the joy in the teaching or in the facilitation of some deep healing? I'm aware that all of these things bring me joy. And so those types of tasks make up the bulk of my working week. And then the other thing that brings me joy personally is being in beautiful spaces and places, being surrounded by beauty. So I try to incorporate that into my working life as well as a bit of an energy booster. I try and make my office as beautiful as possible. I work in the garden as much as I can, or I work from the art gallery, or I work in one of my favorite cafes. And all of these things fuel me. They raise my energy levels and they keep me focused on work without feeling depleted by my environment. So it's those 10 things that I've done that have enabled me to show up consistently for my students for many years whilst managing chronic illnesses. This is one aspect of sustainable visibility, how you show up for your students and your clients. The other aspect of it, of course, is how to be sustainably visible as you're expanding your reach, showing up to people who aren't your students and clients, but who you might be trying to reach so that at some point in the future they become your students and clients. And that's the subject of a different episode. So to recap, the 10 steps I took are: I followed my energetic rhythms, I watched for resistance, and I cleared it out rather than trying to push through it. I aligned my program delivery with my best skill sets. I pulled a small team of teachers around me to support the live elements of the program. I created a business model which matches my best way of being visible. I worked to reduce friction in the program. I set clear boundaries. I took advantage of programmatic rhythms. I opted for simplicity and automation over delegation. And I consciously brought in joy wherever possible. And that's everything for this episode. I hope you found it useful. I'm so looking forward to sharing the rest of this season with you, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks for listening to Lessons in Visibility. If you'd like to connect in other places, come on over to theschoolofvisibility.com, and you can also find us at The School of Visibility on Instagram, Substack, Facebook, and Threads. Lessons in Visibility is produced by the School of Visibility on the land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I acknowledge the peaceful legacy of custodianship that tens of thousands of years of coexistence with the land has bestowed on us all. And I note the visibility journey that remains unfinished. Voice, treaty, truth.